I'm Adrian, the cruise and travel guy. One of the most enjoyable parts of any cruise is visiting ports and having the opportunity to dive into cities and regions for some time of exploration. While in addition to cruise line shore excursions, passengers can choose self-guided or private shore excursions, there are times and places where I rule this out entirely. Many of you would be familiar with the recent news that 8 passengers sailing on board Norwegian Dawn were left ashore in Central Africa on the island of Sao Tome and Principe when they didn't return from a privately organised shore tour on time. According to reports, all guests had embarked on a private shore excursion, not organised through NCL, and only realised they were in trouble at about 2 p.m, 1 hour before the ship's all-aboard time. The guests relied on their tour guides to communicate with the ship, but when the travellers didn't return on time, the ship's crew retrieved the passengers' passports and delivered them to local port agents. According to an article in the New York Post, the guests finally arrived at the wharf more than 1 hour after the ship's scheduled departure time, and they were subsequently denied boarding. Whether you agree or disagree with NCL's actions in this case, it does highlight a huge risk element that people assume when they book a private shore excursion or undertake self-guided touring. I'll be one of the first to say that cruise line shore excursions can be ridiculously priced, sometimes coming in at double the cost of local options, but they do come with a guaranteed return to ship. I've often chosen private shore excursions or self-guided tours in ports around the world, but there are just some cases where it is not worth the upfront saving. In particular, cruise itineraries that visit far-flung destinations where you might not be familiar with the local language, local customs, or communication and transportation infrastructure are prime examples where a private or self-guided shore excursion just isn't the right choice. In places where ships' tenders are required, you also need to consider that on larger vessels with thousands of passengers, it can sometimes take hours to queue on board and disembark, severely limiting your time ashore. In those cases, I sometimes choose a cruise line shore excursion simply to avoid the hassle of having to queue up to get off the ship on a tender. You usually will get a guaranteed disembarkation time from the ship, and once your tour is over, you have the option to continue your time ashore with self-guided touring or even with another private shore excursion. In ports like Santorini, where in the summer months you might find multiple ships at anchor with tens of thousands of guests descending on the island at once, a ship shore excursion can remove a lot of the hassle and headaches and make sure you maximize your time ashore. Then, of course, there are ports and cities where you'll feel confident with the local language, or perhaps know that you can rely on transport options like Uber or taxis. Maybe you've visited there before, and a self-guided or private shore excursion is of no concern, and in those places, that's my preference too. In some cities, such as Sydney, if your cruise ship docks at the centrally located overseas passenger terminal, you could quite easily enjoy a day exploring on foot. But if you are determined to book a private shore excursion, then my recommendation is to make sure that it is scheduled to conclude at least 2 to 3 hours before the ship's all-aboard time. Build in as much buffer time as you can, get started early, and return to the ship early. Cruise lines are under no obligation to ensure that a passenger returns to the ship when they have elected to undertake a private or self-guided tour. It's completely on the guests to make sure that they return on time or otherwise rejoin the ship in another port at their own expense. Cruise lines have to adhere to a number of strict requirements, and late departures from port can often require the line to pay additional port fees or spend more on fuel to make up time between ports. Even natural tidal fluctuations can dictate when and where a ship can anchor or dock, so there's a lot of planning that goes on behind the scenes to make a cruise itinerary operate like clockwork. For the guests caught up in this highly publicized drama, they reboarded Norwegian Dawn 6 days after their tour debacle began. They reportedly traveled through 7 countries along the way, and NCL helped the passengers by facilitating their visas and has even agreed to pay for the group's travel costs between Gambia and Senegal. Despite this, some of the group told NBC News that they had considered not rejoining the ship because, in their words, NCL failed in their basic duty of care. To that I say, I think we all need to take some responsibility and accountability for our own decisions, especially when we choose a riskier path. Of course, you have to take your own requirements and abilities into mind, but there are some cases where a cruise line shore excursion is the best and safest way to navigate and explore a port, and in many cases, it is the only option that I'll consider. Let me know in the comments, have you ever had any experience with this yourself? Have you ever missed a ship or been close to missing a ship? Would you choose a private shore excursion when you're off the beaten path in some far-flung place? Or would you prefer to choose a cruise line shore excursion for the safety? Thanks as always for watching. I really appreciate your support. If you haven't clicked the subscribe button yet, I would appreciate if you could. And if you are looking to book a cruise, you can head to my website, thecruiseandtravelguy.com.au, and keep up with my travels as they happen on Facebook and Instagram at The Cruise and Travel Guy. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon. According to an article in the New York Post, the guests... What? According to an article in the New York Post, the guests finally arrived at the wharf there. Whether you agree or disagree with NCL's actions...